Hello and welcome to another episode of The Coder Career with me, your host Cameron Blackwood. My guest today is Daniel Beck, who, as well as being my colleague at Purplebricks, is a very accomplished JavaScript developer. Dan joins us today to give a ton of insight to people who are getting into the industry, and particularly people who are self-taught, because Dan actually comes from that kind of background himself. He's also experienced some academic environments in computer science as well. So he's really actually explored both paths of learning, so he should be a really interesting person to gather some intel from. Also, a bit of a disclaimer today. It's a bit of a funny one, but me and Dan talked about a course how much we loved called Zero to Mastery. We both learned React using it. I made a joke, and you will still hear the joke, that our podcast is not sponsored by Zero to Mastery, but now we are. So I actually reached out to Zero to Mastery and had a discussion afterwards, after we recorded this episode, and we agreed that it would be a great idea to enter into a partnership. So please use the link in the description below to check out Zero to Mastery. They do all kinds of courses. Myself and Dan in particular recommend the Zero to Junior and the Junior to Senior series, but they also have a suite of courses in tons of different languages, and the instructors are all fantastic. I would only ever recommend a product that I've used myself, and I promise that I've used this and enjoyed it. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hey Dan, thanks so much for joining me. How are you?
Hi, yeah, really excited to join you. Can't wait to get stuck in and talk everything code and interviews, what have you.
Good stuff. So for listeners who aren't familiar with you and your story so far, do you want to give like a brief background about who you are and how you ended up in the world of code?
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm Dan. Hi, nice to meet everyone. So I'm a front-end software engineer. I work with Cam at Purplebricks. I kind of love everything JavaScript. I think that's my favorite part. And yeah, so I kind of had a bit of a crazy journey personally. So I've kind of went through the uni path. I started off kind of doing computer science. I then ended up switching courses halfway through. I then ended up in media production and then ended up finishing in computer games technology. Very weird path. And then I ended up becoming a website developer, and then about 5 years later I ended up at Purplebricks.
Very nice. So you basically just wanted to like collect each university building, just tour them all by the end of the year.
Exactly. Maybe I just really like university. I think that's what it was.
Cool. So the way I like to have the audience get to know you a little bit better is via some quick fire questions. Obviously, I fired these over to you beforehand, so you're nice and prepped with the answers, so no pressure. So first and foremost, the big one, what was your first ever computer?
I think my first ever one was a Lenovo ThinkPad laptop. So it was kind of one of those like businessy square black laptops. They had a weird like thing, you put your finger on it. It was acted a little bit like the mouse.
The nipple.
Yeah, the nipple. But such a weird invention, to be honest. But yeah, it brings back a few memories, that one.
Those are really good because they're totally upgradable. Like, my girlfriend's got one for her work laptop, and she hates it. But I've been trying to convince her how good it is. But she's more or less said, "Well, why do you use a MacBook then?" Which is a fair point.
Yeah, I think it's one of those laptops that it just goes through anything. Like that amount of times I dropped it, that it just worked.
It's the Nokia, which is the iconic Nokia model, the Nokia 3100. It's the Nokia 3100 equivalent of a laptop.
Definitely, 100%.
I think I might have had one of those actually back in the day as well. I think you know what might have actually been my first machine as well, which makes sense because I think we're about the same age, so that would make sense. Cool. And what about your favorite tech city in the world?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a big city fan, but I would have to say personally, from my experience, Birmingham. I love the meetups there. Also, I'm pretty sure School of Code was from that area as well. I think for me, it's super awesome. I mean, I do love London as well, Shoreditch, that kind of thing. But yeah, Birmingham, heart of heart.
Nice. The Silicon Canal's got your heart.
Yeah,
very nice. Yeah, I've got a soft spot for Birmingham, so I went to uni at University of Birmingham. So I always get good times over in Selly Oak. Shout out to any UOB people if you're listening. And what about when you're writing your code? What type of music do you tend to listen to?
I'm going to be honest, I'm super diverse. One day I could be listening to rap, then it's rock. maybe a little bit of heavy metal in there, and then all of a sudden I'm back at pop again.
So it's saying by that as you listen to Limp Bizkit
Yeah,
out of all
exactly.
of those.
Definitely.
Okay, yeah, I'm the same really. It just fluctuates. That's the good thing about Spotify, right? But yeah, I'm the same. I like to just plug a daily mix on and just chug away. I thought you were going to say when you said I'm going to be honest. I thought you were about to say I work in silence, and I was like, I didn't know I worked alongside a psychopath.
Yeah, either that or turn around and say it's Taylor Swift all day long, baby.
Hey, nothing wrong with Taylor Swift. What about when you're actually writing the code? Obviously, we have certain working hours that obviously humans conform to because we live in society, right? But would you say you're more of an early bird or a night owl?
I would say night owl until everything goes wrong and it's on fire. I love the late nights. I love that kind of thing. But when production code's in my mind and it's breaking, I'll wake up at 6 in the morning. My mind won't switch off, and I'm kind of just constantly thinking,
Yeah.
how can this be fixed? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar in a sense. Personal projects late at night. Like I was watching Scotland eke 1-0 past the Faroe Islands last night, and so luckily I had some code to write because that was probably the dullest 90 minutes of my life. But yeah, sort of thing. Late at night, if it's low pressure code, yeah, I definitely prefer it. But there are certain times where you need to be full of energy and fully alert because if production's down, then it's kind of all systems go. What about pre the code days? Back when you were a kid, what job did you want to do when you were an adult?
I think that's an interesting one. I always had either computers were one of the things in mind. My dad used to own a computer business, so he used to sell
Hmm.
computers. So as a kid, I kind of grew up around them, and I found them really, really awesome. If not for that, I'd probably think something to do with cars. I absolutely love cars, or maybe business. Quite a handful of things to be honest. But computers are awesome, ones and zeros.
Would that be like hardware or software?
Um, that's a good point. I started off thinking it would be kind of like hardware and kind of like maintenance. I started my journey as a IT technician.
Hmm.
So it was initially kind of setting up hardware. Um, you also get the kind of standard Office stuff of configuring, Word, Office. If anyone else has got a problem, that kind of thing. But yeah, then I found the love for websites. Never went back.
Very nice, very nice. And I guess that kind of leads me into the big question to really get us started is how did you get to the point where you got your first job as a junior developer? Tell me the story from university all the way through to that first day where you're getting paid to write JavaScript, which is a glorious day.
Oh, the best day ever, to be honest. So yeah, I guess it all started. Well, my journey physically started when I was 16. I was kind of like, I really, really want to get into tech of any kind. I was very, very lucky to know one of my friends. Their parents actually owned a business, and they were actually looking for an IT technician. So I was lucky enough to start off there, and I kind of just worked there for years and years. Went to uni. Um, uh, and during I did computer science, and one of the modules was websites, and I absolutely loved it. I think that was my favorite part. The reason why I didn't end up finishing computer science was I just couldn't get along with the maths at first. I kind of went from college where it was pretty much like an IT course. It wasn't anything to do with coding. To all of a sudden, you're around everyone who've been coding for X amount of time. You're in the deep end learning, C, Haskell, all these crazy. And it wasn't like, at the moment with websites, right? You physically seeing something. With that, it was more of let's work out these mathematical equations. Just didn't hit right for me. But I got to that module. I was like, I really, really love this. And my employers, obviously, I mentioned it to them, and they're like, well, we need to make website making. Why don't you make one? That's where it first started. So this business was super, super small. I think it was about 6 employees at the time. So yeah, I pretty much went out there and went, right, take all this knowledge that I've learned from this one semester, and let's start to make a website. So that just started as a super, super basic website. As you can imagine, you're kind of like on your own. And then as it kind of time progresses and I kind of learn a little bit more. So when I switched to media production, I think there was a module called something like multimedia development or something like that, where you would that's where I kind of first learned about ActionScript, which obviously is no more now. And there was HTML kind of spliced in there from time to time, and kind of slowly ended up being websites with JavaScript. But yeah, so I kind of got to that point and then went down the, well, not so nice route of PHP. The website slowly progressed over time to the point of ending in a well, pretty much a custom made custom made CMS.
CMS,
Yeah,
yeah.
there we go. With all these well, I would say awesome bells and whistles. If I went back and looked at the code now, I'd probably be thinking what was going through my head. But yeah, so I finished uni, and the final year, the reason why I went to computer games development was it shares a lot of modules of computer science. So all my friends that were graduating there, I was in the same modules as them. So I ended up learning like Java, ended up doing a few other bits and bobs, and then kind of finished there, and then continued at it for a few years, and then realized I'm getting nowhere here. There's only so much you can learn from books. There's only so much you can learn from Google. And realized if I'm going to get anywhere, I need to pretty much just retrain from scratch, and work out what I want to retrain in. From kind of where I was at, number one, having no guidance from any senior member of staff like we do now. So if you've got a problem, you can kind of turn around, ask a senior, or you can learn from a senior. It's quite hard realizing what good code actually looks like until you've got someone to show you. The internet's a big place, and Stack Overflow can show you some really awesome stuff. It can also show you some pretty interesting stuff, I would say. I took the dive, and I took 6 months out. And I think me and you actually ended up doing the same course. So on Udemy, there's a course which was Zero to Mastery, and then I think it was also they did another one which was
The junior to senior one.
Junior to Senior. So
Yeah, I did the same.
that was I did those two courses within 6 months, as well as a few other bits and bobs. Finally got everything together. And then once I was ready, I knocked on Purplebricks' door. And luckily, wouldn't say I got through due to my technical ability. I think I got through due to my pure enthusiasm. And I was very, very lucky. That's what I will say. And ever since then, it's just been pretty much accelerating at 1,000 miles an hour, learning everything that's just super, super dope about JavaScript. Yeah. And then we're at this point today.
Cool. That sounds really good. I want to drill down on one thing in particular because I think the listeners get a lot of value from it. You say knocking on the door of Purplebricks. Tell us the war story. How did it happen? Because a lot of people are quite cautious to kick down a door in front of them.
Yeah, so I guess it's worth saying that this was probably my second interview that I've tried, if not third. I've definitely applied for maybe in the region of 30 jobs plus. I think definitely when you're trying to apply for a junior role, it's really hard to work out, what's good. I think especially in this current climate where, let's just say, I think a lot of companies are looking for more senior staff. What I ended up doing was just splurging out loads and loads of CVs. If something was React, if something was JavaScript, I'd be there. I'd be applying for it. And I think the key thing is for me is just getting stuck in. I ended up going to one interview where pretty much just got destroyed. And it's all good. But it's a learning thing where I can go, right, this is where I struggled. This is what the feedback was. I would say always ask for feedback, because 9 out of 10 times people are willing to give it. I think we're in a nice industry if you find the right place, at least, where they're willing to put in the time. I think me and you definitely, if someone asked, I'd be the first person to give them as much feedback as physically possible. But yeah, so with Purplebricks, I think it was probably one of the longest interviews they ever had. I'm pretty sure I started there. The interview started in the morning, and then it was still after lunch when we were still going. And that was just showing off a project. But it was just because I had so many questions, you know. And I think the key thing is if you can show you really, really want to learn, that's the number one thing as a junior developer. Having that appetite, and willing to put the hard work in, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to say, obviously I've met a lot of developers in my time, both as a recruiter and now as a developer myself, but I literally don't think I've ever actually met anyone more enthusiastic than you. So I'm
Well,
not
thank you,
surprised
Cam.
not surprised the interview took all morning. Cool. And what would you take the same approach now? Like, would you take the same approach of going for a lot of applications, or would you go for the more deep application to a few places? What approach would you take to someone who's on the job hunt now?
So, as a junior or as kind of more experienced?
We'll say junior. Yeah, junior. Someone with 0 to 18 months experience before the market is really weighted in their favour.
Yeah, I would probably say, to me, be slightly careful. Make sure you're finding the exact thing you want to do. I think the key for me, and I think for maybe the advice I'd give to a lot of devs out there, is kind of personally, I would try to specialize in an area. It's very easy to get these full stack roles where you're doing this, that, and the other. This might be, crazy advice, so take it with a heed of warning. But I would be very tempted to try and find something. If you want to be a back-end developer, try and find that role. I think there's a lot of roles where there's blurry lines in between. And I think as a junior, when you're trying to start off, I think the value is just being able to focus on one thing, get those core skills down. So I would be very, very tempted just to work out what you want. So in my case, it would be front end, it would be React, it would be JavaScript. I mean, it's very, very hard. What I would be very, very tempted to do is there's loads of meetups everywhere. I would go searching out for maybe a JavaScript meetup. Like, for example, in Birmingham, we've got Brum.js. There's loads of people there, really good for networking. And, just being able to speak to people with actual experience. If I had that back in the day and could say, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to go, I'm sure loads of people there would love to give you advice and love to help you in any way they can. So I would just try and network and find your niche of what you want to really get good at, and find it. Because at the end of the day, if you're not going in a job to learn, why are you there? It's a learning thing, and you want to learn the right things you want to learn.
Yeah, definitely. I got my first dev job through networking. It's the best way to do it. And yeah, wherever you are, there's tons of events. Something popped in my head actually. I know 25% of the listener base is in the States, so they're probably a bit confused. I was talking about Birmingham. If you can't tell from Dan's accent, we're talking about Birmingham, UK, in the Midlands of England. We're not talking about Birmingham, Alabama, or Georgia. It's one of the two. But yeah, definitely. Networking is so powerful, and there's a stat that's probably a load of rubbish that's trotted out by recruiters all the time about like 80% of jobs not being advertised, because that the reason why they trot that out is like agency recruiters, because they're trying to pitch into companies because the jobs are there, but they're just not being advertised. But a lot of jobs aren't advertised. I know that for a fact. And a lot of the time, companies when they see someone with enthusiasm, are prepared to sort of, maybe if there was something coming up in the future, maybe bring that deadline a bit forward, because devs aren't the most common of people to find. So it's definitely worth approaching. And yeah, I agree with you. To speak to people at meetups, like it's hard. Like it's hard to get over. We're British, right? We don't like talking to strangers, but it's hard. It's hard to do it. But once you get used to it, it gets much easier. And the amount of people I know that got a job just through having a coffee or a beer with someone at a meetup is unbelievable. So I totally echo your advice there. And we talked as well about how we both learned using the course actually, or Zero to Mastery. They now have their own website called Zero to Mastery Academy, and off chance if they're listening, then sling me a promo code. I'll promote you on here. My rates are very low, so that's a great course. How would you say you go about learning stuff, both when you were a junior and these days? Because obviously we never stop learning.
Definitely. I think the key is working out what kind of learner you are. So what I mean by that is some people are visual learners. Some people can, some people an audiobook might work. Some people you can just sit down and read a book. And I think it's figuring out the most efficient way you can use your time to learn. I've realized personally that videos are the one thing for me. I need to physically see something. I need to just have that visual thing on the screen. I've tried to read books and I've read some books because the videos don't exist, and I find it really, really hard to digest the information. And I think for me, having courses to go through is just the right way for me to do it. And we're very lucky to have front end master subscriptions. And I can't say a bad thing about a single course that I've watched on that site. It does cost quite a lot of money, which is a shame. But the quality of the content on there is just absolutely amazing. I think if it wasn't for those courses, I wouldn't be where I am right now. Yeah.
That reminds me, I need to review the latest course on there. It's funny we're talking about Zero to Mastery, but it's got such I don't know what you call it. With a game, you call it replayability, but rewatchable, I guess, or redoable. I'm actually going to redo the whole junior to senior one because the information is so good. And honestly, like I said, I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that, but that it's a great course and the instructor is really clear with how he explains it. So yeah, couldn't recommend that highly enough. And I would say I'm the same as you. I struggle to learn coding from books. Other stuff I can learn from books, no issue. Like maths or something, I wouldn't have an issue learning that from a book. But yeah, I would be very hesitant to people to tell people to learn code from a book with the information out there today. The best two ways are through courses, and that can either be a YouTube channel or Udemy or whatever. So Zero to Mastery, already mentioned, Traversing Media. I think Farship was one we were talking about the other day.
Gotta love that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want good, concise information, then Farship is the way to go. But there's so many on there. I'm gonna maybe make a list of like recommended content because it is just there's so much free stuff out there, and then that's not even including the tutorial sites. Like Free Code Camp has got, I think, probably now tens of thousands of hours worth of coding exercises to do. So there's really, you don't have to spend anything other than your internet bill to learn. And yeah, I couldn't recommend that enough. And would you say the industry's evolved a lot during your career, and how do you manage to balance between being effective in your day-to-day job while also as well learning about the newest technologies?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. So I guess from my point of view, I kind of went from the old school kind of like PHP, kind of got jQuery, you got all these script tags, to kind of going into the awesome JavaScript world. You learn the foundations, you get to the mid level, and then you kind of get to a point of, right, I know a baseline here, but there's a lot of different directions you can kind of put yourself in. Like for example, you could go down the accessibility route, you could go down the performance route. You could kind of go into the hardcore kind of fundamentals of JavaScript. And I think it's working out what makes you happy. And I find also half the time you kind of end up molding yourself to what the job needs. From time to time, somehow I'm just magically a DevOps engineer. But it's all brilliant fun. And I think my number one tip that I would give to anyone, that I got from some amazing devs in the past, which is make notes of pretty much everything. If you're learning a course, if you're learning on the job, I use Notion a lot. I think it's used fairly widely across the industry. I've got loads and loads and loads of pages within that of cheat sheets for Git. If I randomly forget something, I've got all these awesome commands. I've got it for Docker if I'm, or if I'm in Kubernetes. Anything at all, even accessibility, even the basic JavaScript stuff, I've always got a cheat sheet. So if I go to myself, right, I need to implement this one thing right now. For example, you might even be using the context API in React. I've got a note for that with an implementation, with an explanation. So I don't have to necessarily go back through everything because I might not be implementing that for another 3 months. But you've got that implementation detail down and you've got all your notes there, so you can kind of just dive straight into it and go, oh yeah, that's just a quick refresher. I already know how it works behind the scenes, but you just need that little top me up to keep going because it's very, very easy to, forget something. We're all human at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And Notion, I'd never, you know what? I don't think I'd even heard of it before I joined Purplebricks. I think it was either you or Josh or Ben recommended it to me, and it has changed. Honestly, changed my life. Like I use it. I just have like Cameron's Notion, and I just operate everything through my life in there. I track my weightlifting in there. I have my general to do list in my life. Everything to do with this podcast is tracked through there. Like there is no chance this podcast would have got past 3 episodes had it not been for Notion. And I haven't even thought to keep cheat sheets in there. That's such a good idea. Definitely +1 to Notion. I've literally got the notes up for this podcast on Notion right now.
Ditto.
It is so powerful. Yeah, one of those things. God bless the freemium model, right? Let enterprises subsidize great software for us. It's good stuff. And we've talked a lot about getting into tech and learning. If someone came to you and said, Dan, I'm getting to the point where I'm leaving school, haven't made a decision on going to uni or maybe even sixth form college yet, but I know I want to get into tech, and specifically I want to be a developer, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think in my head there's kind of 3 different paths to a certain degree. The first one, which I kind of really like, is the School of Code bootcamp. I know you get loads of different boot camps. I think it's quite interesting how nowadays you don't really need a degree to code. And I think it's kind of popping up more and more because of the demand in the industry. You don't need a computer science degree to be a developer. Don't get me wrong, those fundamentals are really awesome. And it's really great to have, but I think you can I would say maybe within 3 to 6 months be trained up to a level of you can get out there and you can start pushing some production code. So the number one thing I would probably suggest is look for boot camps. I mean, the School of Code one, again, you say most of the places guys are from America, guys and gals, but that's a really good one. But yeah, boot camps. I think the second one would be computer science. Obviously, from my experience, it didn't go so well. But bear in mind that is always an option, and you get taught some really awesome stuff there. And then the third one I would say is courses. Courses are just super dope, as me and you've experienced. But yeah, I think it's hard. It's always going to be hard to get your first job and break into industry. But I think the key thing is you've got to really want it. And I wouldn't have taken 6 months out for no reason to get to the place where I am if I didn't think, right, I really want this job. And I think, a lot more people do deserve to be in jobs. So yeah.
Yeah, and when you think about it, you made a really significant economic investment and sacrifice by giving up paid work for 6 months to really concentrate. And sometimes that's what it takes. For me, my approach was it took me much longer to get into tech, to get into development specifically, because I couldn't and didn't really. I was living in London at times, very expensive. I would have really struggled to give up my job. But I still carved out the time of working at least an hour a day on my courses for more like a year or so before I was getting to the point where I was like job ready. But yeah, and it's interesting what you say about computer science. There's such a massive trend of people saying don't go to university, and actually, I think it's generally a good idea, especially a bachelor's, to go to university, more so because of the wider ecosystem. Like I said this on the podcast before, I don't even regret the fact that I did a business degree rather than computer science a lot of the time, because the thing is, the environment you're exposed to, especially if you pick the right university, is really good. And it's the sort of place where you can easily meet co-founders. They've often got university investment funds if you want to start up your own, software startup. Romeo, who was guest number 4, I believe, on this podcast, he went to University of Leicester and was given, I think, like a 5-figure sum as a grant to work on his startup. Like, there's so many. It's such a good environment. Not to mention, it's really fun as well. And obviously, your mileage may vary depending on where you are in the world. If you're from Central Europe, then you can go for free. So it's definitely a great option. If you're from the UK, from England, I'm Scottish, but I went to school in England. and I had to pay £27,000 for 3 years, but that's deducted out of my paycheck over time, so I can consider that an investment. Had I actually gone to school in Scotland, it would have been free, which is slightly annoying because I live in Scotland now. But oh well, it is what it is. But it's whether you consider that investment worth it, because there is a threshold. So it's almost like if you don't make the money, then you don't pay. So it's kind of a managed risk. But I guess that's a very long way of me saying that, yeah, I agree with you. The degree's not dead yet. Don't do something you know you won't use, is what I would say. But computer science is useful. And I feel like a lot of courses are modernizing quite a bit. So you don't get me wrong, there's a place for C, right? We're always going to need like CPU acceleration and computer vision and all that mad stuff that I don't really understand when I'm working with React. But it's, you know, we still need that, and it's still a great idea to learn that if you can. I've learned a little bit of C myself, but yeah, there's a lot of courses that are modernizing, and yeah, I highly recommend it. Or even go to university and do a business degree or something, and do learn coding on the side. There's no reason why you can't go to uni and learn to code at the same time. There's a ton of options, and yeah, don't necessarily get on the university hate train. I think it's what we're both saying. Like, obviously, it's a managed decision and something each individual needs to make for themselves. I wouldn't, you know, if I was speaking to a relative now, I wouldn't try and persuade them either way, because I think both options are pretty equally valid at the moment, really. Certainly in the UK, as I said, your mileage may vary where you're from. But in terms of, I had a bit of a diatribe there, trying to think, getting back onto the questions I was going to ask you. In terms of the work you've done so far, is there anything you would have changed about your career in code? Anything where, if you had a time machine, go back to the first sort of 6 months in particular, is there any approach you would have done, either technically, non-technically, working with people, or like focus your learning on something in particular?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest one would have been how long I stayed at my first company. Given the fact that I didn't have any mentorship at all, that's a big factor. I mean, it's really good being able to physically say you made this, but I think you need, you know, more senior staff around you to be able to guide you in the right direction. I think that was the big one for me. But I guess equally, if I didn't stay there for so long, I probably wouldn't have ended down the React route. I could have been anywhere. I could have been a full stack PHP developer, you know, not creating this awesome JavaScript goodness. But yeah, I would say, you know, just work out. I think there's probably you end up being at a company for a certain amount of time, and I wouldn't say it's a bad thing being somewhere for too long, but it's just working out where and how and what you want to kind of expose yourself to. Loads of companies have loads of different setups, use loads of different technology, and nowhere's going to be the same. And I think for me personally, kind of going there and learning from different environments. A lot of people start their journey probably not as such a big company that I have. So I've kind of missed out on the journey of, you know, maybe working at an agency, kind of trying all these different kinds of work. And I think that's what I need right now. But yeah, I would say just kind of get stuck in. And I think once you got your first job, you're kind of laughing to a certain degree, as long as you put in the time and effort, and just go out there and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Never forget to enjoy it, and never forget like that we're lucky enough to work in an industry where we do something we genuinely enjoy, which is writing code. Saying that, it doesn't have to be like your out and out passion. You don't have to be coding all night. Like, you know, if you want to do it just for the money, like, I don't think plumbers are going home and redoing the boiler every night, right? But you know, they obviously still probably have a passing interest in the trade, right? But as long as it doesn't bore you to tears, then it's still worth doing. But if you find you've got a spark for it, then, you know, this life is too short. Don't waste it doing something that isn't software engineering. You can get paid, and get paid well, to do what both me and you find a very enjoyable role. And something I wanted to say, because I noticed someone had made a LinkedIn post, and I wish I had saved it, because I've forgotten who posted it. But she was saying about how there's this like real misconception about how software engineering, you never deal with people and there's no people skills involved. In a standard like agile model, you're dealing with people all the time and you're dealing with stakeholders a lot. And if you're worried you're going to be locked in a dark room coding all day, it's kind of an outdated stereotype, really. And I think that scares a lot of people away from the industry, because you will be talking to people. I didn't really have much time to code today because I was in quite a few meetings. They're all important meetings, and today was a very busy day. But you're going to be talking to people a lot, especially if you're a front end developer, because you're always going to be doing check-ins with the stakeholders, both internally and externally. And I don't have significantly less meetings than when I was a recruiter. In all honesty, I maybe talk a bit less. I'm not on the phone all the time. My throat's thankful for that. But, don't be afraid of it being an antisocial job. And developers aren't all strange sort of goblin creatures that live in a dungeon and write, write JavaScript all day. It's a pretty social industry. And I've certainly just go to any meetup and you'll have plenty of chatting and beer and pizza if that's your thing. So it's definitely something to keep in mind as well. What do you think the best thing about working in our industry is?
That's a really good question. I guess for me, kind of collaboration is the number one. I think that's kind of like the best way you're going to, number one, learn, and also number two, kind of help everyone around you. I think the key thing is, especially with Agile, it's kind of like how you interact with well, I could just class them as teammates, to be honest. It's not like we're work colleagues. We're all going towards that, number one goal at the end of the sprint. I think the idea is, the minute I've got a question or the minute someone else has got a question, I want to be that person that someone can reach out to me, or I could reach out to them. And if you're not, as you say, if you're not kind of constantly doing like a dev box, if you're not constantly updating people, I feel like you kind of got to be in that role of talking to everyone to a certain degree. I think it can get a little bit too much, where you end up in my case, you can be very nice, and then everyone comes to you with their problems. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the key thing is, it's kind of like, I think for me, progression and collaboration are the two, because you're never going to get to a point in your career where you're not challenged. There's always going to be that next thing. And I think, especially with front end development, the industry moves so fast. Within a blink of an eye. I mean, if I could look back to kind of like 2 years ago to what the code looks then to what it kind of looks now, so much has changed, so many new technologies are in there. And I think that's the thing that always keeps me on the edge of my seat, knowing that round the corner, someone's going to come out with this awesome technology that we're probably all going to be using.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's exciting. Like, it's ever evolving, and sometimes that's a bit stressful, but it's very easy to get caught up in things are changing all the time, I've got to learn everything. I saw a funny tweet about where a guy basically said, I didn't pay any attention to JavaScript news for 6 months, and I didn't spontaneously combust and lose my job. You don't have to be like this crazy absolute Nostradamus of the JavaScript industry, but it changes a lot, which is exciting. And you can, as long as you're not trying to still use Flash in 2021 or ActionScript like we already discussed, in which case you have plenty of warning. It's one of those things where you can really just get stuck in, learn new things through a variety of mediums. So that's definitely like a massive plus for me as well. I think as well the satisfaction of I'm someone who, you mentioned being very into cars. I like looking at cars. When it comes to maintaining them, are absolutely useless and that kind of thing. I've always wanted to be good with my hands, always, and I've always struggled with it. Like DT or shop, as some people in other countries call it, in school, it was my worst subject by absolute. No. Cookery was my worst subject. DT was my second worst subject, and it was one of those things where I could never make anything. But the cookery didn't bother me because at that age I was like, oh, it's fine. Mum cooks. Obviously now we have a slight more of a problem there, so I'm having to learn to cook at 26. Yeah, unfortunately, Mum is 400 miles away. Luckily, my girlfriend will cook sometimes, but obviously, I need to cook as well. But anyway, back to the point. I always wanted to be able to make, a table or something like that. And I've always really struggled with that. Whereas code gives me that same sort of feeling of satisfaction where you're clicking it together, and something about making an API call successful and returning some data really kind of shook something in me. And I think the first time I did that, actually, that was when I was like, I have to do this for a job. Like I'd never felt anything like that doing recruitment, either externally or internally. It just lit some kind of like crazy spark in my head. I was like, I absolutely love this. And yeah, you just get this amazing. My very long answer to what I like about it is you just get this amazing feeling of satisfaction when things go right, and you get into this crawling out of the pit of despair when you couldn't work something out, and it's like you've climbed a mountain and you shut 70 Chrome tabs of Stack Overflow and stuff like that, and it's working, and inevitably it was just a typo, and you just feel amazing. You feel like Steve Wozniak, and nothing's better than that feeling. So yeah, I absolutely love that. I guess in terms of kind of moving forward, is there anything you're working on at the moment? Like what's the future hold for you in terms of side projects and that sort of thing, or is that all confidential?
And definitely not confidential. I'm kind of in the middle of recording a series on YouTube. It's kind of like all about the inner workings of how things work.
Oh, nice.
So I've already recorded one, which I actually did live on stage at Brum.js, which was essentially creating a module bundler from scratch. So for anyone who doesn't know, it's kind of the idea of it does what Webpack does. You have files in your JavaScript project, and it kind of bundles them all together into one bundle, and then it can get displayed on the web page. So it's a kind of series of going through each kind of like mini technology. So for example, creating your own test runner, so doing what Jest does, and kind of the inner workings of each different element. And the final one would be creating React from scratch with all the hooks and all the class-based stuff. It's doing what I love. And I'm well aware that people don't have the time to go into the inner workings of these things and look at the crazy source code. Just what I like to do. So probably slightly weird, but yeah, I'm slowly getting there. These things take a lot of time. I was going to release it, try and do kind of like once a week, but I've realized these things just spiral out of control very, very fast.
Oh yeah, trust me, a podcast. I do a bit of YouTube as well, and the podcast is hard enough to edit. It's when video comes in that's when it gets really complicated.
Exactly. so yeah, that's what I've currently got in the works. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have kind of a project where, for example, you have your own Jest transformer. You'll have every single part of the website that you see on the screen you've physically made. There'll be no source code, no packages from anyone else. Yeah, kind of super looking forward to finishing that off, to be honest.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it, mate, and I'll definitely sort of code along. I do actually remember the first conversation we had when I joined Purplebricks. We sort of booked in a hello sort of chat, and I was like, "So you working on much at the moment?" And you're just like, "Yeah, I'm rebuilding React." And I was like, "This bloke is mad."
Yeah, I'm a bit of a fickler for detail. I think that's the thing. I found what I love doing, and it's just working out how everything works behind the scenes. If I don't know, I get slightly worried. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah.
I think that's a good. Yeah, I think that's a very good thing, and that's a little sort of kind of quick tip would be make sure you know your vanilla JavaScript, because it is remarkably easy to dive headfirst into React because it is very fashionable. The employment market's good, but when the going gets tough, vanilla JS gets going. You need to learn your basic JavaScript, because it's one of those things where if you don't understand it very well, you won't understand more advanced features of React very well, and it's like a house of cards. It'll all collapse. Make sure you know your vanilla JavaScript first. Again, we keep shouting it out, and I really need to get a sponsorship from them. Zero to Mastery is great for that. Also, Free Code Camp will give you tons of vanilla JS stuff. Try and build a project or two in vanilla JS before you get stuck into any framework or library, because that's when you'll learn to truly appreciate how good they are. And something interesting from my last round of job searching when I ended up getting a job at Purplebricks. Purplebricks didn't do this to me, but some companies that I was interested in, the technical challenge was no frameworks allowed, all vanilla JavaScript. So that's something worth keeping in mind as well. And certainly when I got my first job in tech, I think it was like over 50% was no frameworks allowed. So definitely something worth keeping in mind. In fact, one I did wouldn't even let you use some built-in array methods, so you couldn't even use map, filter, sort, anything like that. So yeah, make sure you understand the underlying fundamentals.
Definitely second that.
Don't get too scared either. But yeah, all of that stuff is easily teachable, and you don't need to know, like, particularly if you're going to be a front end developer or something. Don't worry about. I see a lot of stuff on like Reddit and that kind of thing about leak code and that kind of thing. Like, you don't really need to bother that, and if you don't want to, like, it's much like 90% of companies, particularly for front end developers, care a lot more about if you can build a very nice UX for for a single page application, rather than, oh, can you reverse a linked list? Like,
I
I
think
think
that's a really good point.
the only one I've ever had to use my entire career, that's like a leak code kind of thing, is I had to use a binary search once, but that's not even the most complex thing in the world to understand anyway.
100%. I think it's realizing as well, you don't have to be the best at everything. As long as you know some things, like, you're always going to get some developers that are weighted in one direction more than others, and everything is perfectly teachable. So if you are trying to go for your first job, understanding something is one thing. You don't have to be the expert. So you might be, you might absolutely love one topic. You might be really into CSS, a little bit of JavaScript, HTML, that kind of thing.
Mm.
You don't have to be an expert in it all. I think that's, one of the key things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something related to that as well is, as a junior, it's much better to admit when you don't understand something, to the senior developers, and admit it early. Like, because otherwise you're going to end up, you're going to end up is much better than struggling for days with a problem. Like, that was something I struggled with very early on. I was scared to ask for help, but it's one of those things. Senior devs are more than happy to help, and it's much more productive to be honest and admit when something's a struggle, because then as well, it's also really useful for senior developers to know what's unclear, so they can explain things in a much clearer manner.
100%. And I think for me personally as well, it's kind of like figuring out when you ask. I think for me, it started off being as a junior at the absolute bottom. It used to be, if I couldn't fix it by like half an hour, I'd be asking. And then all of a sudden, I'd raise it to 45 minutes, to an hour, to then an hour and a half. And before you know it, half of it's already in your brain. You're already
Yeah,
there. But I wouldn't kill yourself over it. It's definitely, people are there to support you. And as you grow, you're going to be helping the company more. Everyone's going to benefit. So yeah, definitely speak up.
absolutely. One thing I would say before you message a person on Slack or whatever, write out your message in your notes first. Make sure you clearly understand the problem, because then you might find a solution anyway, because that happens to me all the time. And then, only then drop a message, because they'll appreciate a well formatted message. And this is such a pet peeve as well. Don't just put like hi and then wait for the reply. That is so annoying, because you get the notification come through, and then you get the person typing for ages, like, okay, what do I do with this? Yeah, and don't be afraid as well. A big one is, if you're working on a new ticket, like, message a senior developer and say, like, hey, I just didn't understand X, Y, and Z. Can we just book a 15-minute call? Like, I do it all the time. I'm not a junior anymore. I still do it all the time with senior developers. I'm like, look, I just want to go through this, and just take some time with them, maybe after a stand up, to go through some things you're a bit unfamiliar about with the ticket, and you'll save yourself tons of time. And you save them tons of time at PR review time.
100%. I mean, you're not expected to be able to build everything from scratch the first time. You've got to learn. So yeah, definitely reach out. The team's there as a resource, so it's just using it to your advantage.
Exactly, and yeah, on that positive note, I think that draws us towards the end of the pod. I mean, obviously, your YouTube channel sounds really exciting, Dan. Is it public yet, or will it be public by the
Not
time this
yet.
comes out?
Maybe, I think the best way to kind of find that is maybe me on LinkedIn, if that's possible. I will be putting it on there. I'm pretty sure it's just Dan Beck on LinkedIn.
I'll
Me
put a
in
link in
a
the description.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah, and everything's just going to get shoved on there once it's ready to go. No promise on when it's done. Hopefully soon. But yeah, the sooner the better. But yeah, I would say that's the number one platform. Especially reach out if anyone fancies a chat. More than happy to give more advice on anything.
Excellent, good stuff. Well, Dan's LinkedIn will be in the description, and I can assure you, as a colleague of his, he's extremely approachable, and he'll be more than happy to help you, as he says. And yeah, thank you so much for listening today to the Coder Career. Please make sure to join our Discord. And as well, the website, I know it's been a running joke since episode 1 on how the website is nearly ready. It literally is nearly ready because I did a practice deployment the other day. So by the time this comes out, I actually think it's going to be live. It's going to be very funny when it's probably not live after all of this. But the link to that will be in the description. It might even be on there. Thecodercareer.com might be live. Might not be the GoDaddy parking spot. Anyways, thanks so much for coming on, Dan. You're an excellent guest. And yeah, looking forward to maybe doing another one in the future. And I think people will have got a lot of value out of this.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's been absolutely fun. Thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, cheers for having me on.
Great stuff. Well, thanks again, listener. This has been the Coder Career with Cam Blackwood. My guest today is Dan Beck. Check us out. All the links in the description. Join our Discord, as I said. Have a great week.